Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wilhelm Schaak. I'm a role player in the private industry. I'm a vet and ecologist, and I've been active in the industry for 40 years. We've got a family history of about 80 years dealing with rhino, so I think I can speak with some authority about rhino conservation. Please bear with me. I was about to open my address by welcoming the Honourable Minister Godongwana, but unfortunately I have to do that at another time. But mainly my presentation is focused towards a government, because that is where our big challenge lies in terms of international role South Africa plays in rhino conservation and the partnerships and the support we need internally from our country. So I will rush through a couple of slides in my presentation. There are about 50. I'll run quickly through them, and at the end of the presentation I'll go slower at those that I feel could be impactful and could contribute meaningfully to our discussion and to the purpose of the day here. So this is the kind of experience which I've got and my team, and the cooperation we had with Kruger in the past, with Sandparks, the teams working together, exporting rhinos from Kruger into the country, all over the show. For my efforts, at some stage, I was awarded a Business Partner of the Year from Sandparks, helping them with rhino issues at Marakele National Park. So, to give you a short overview of my presentation here, I'll tell you a little bit about my personal motivation. Then I'll make an economic case for legalization of horn trade. Then I come with suggestions under the umbrella of Operation Firewall, and then I'll have to say something about partnerships in future and how we can deal with this problem. Okay, this is one. I'll skip that one for the time being, and all the rest I'll just run through so that you know, and it's also meant to inform people who know a little about rhino conservation and dealing with them and the management systems behind that. It's meant to enlighten them and see what's happening in the field and so forth. And I want to allay criticisms about what dehorning procedure does to the animals and so forth. There's a lot of false and fake news going around about dehorning. It's a safe procedure, very low risk. The rhinos are very tough, and they don't easily are influenced by this thing. And then the horns often break off in nature in any case. So how do they deal with that then? So we know that it's a sustainable yield. Horns regrow, and I want to make a big point about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals today. At the end of this talk, I'll talk a little bit about that. But we, if we do rhino management and conservation procedures properly, we answer and we tick all the boxes of the 17 social development goals that the United Nations has set. And I've never heard that being talked about, but this is a crucial point. We comply with what the United Nations asks the world to do in terms of sustainable development. Then we are spot on with what being proposed by Proa and the private owners and everybody. So quickly, I've been dehorning many rhinos, and that's why my question about the price of the horns. You know, I was doing all my calculations based on like a $50,000 per kilogram thing. Actually sad to hear that it's now only 23, and finally I'll give some comments on that as well. But that is the kind of yield, the weights that I got from those horns that I dehorned, between 3 and 8 kilogram more or less, that we found. You can do your own calculations. Dehorning has negligible effects on the social structure of the horns. Look at this, you know, a 3-ton rhino protecting a calf. Nobody can beat that kind of defense. So look at that, you know. she's defending a calf lying in the dust there, a dead calf. She's protecting a dead calf. You can't break that defense at all. And she's without a horn. These are the things that I came across. That's a black rhino killed by another one, a horned rhino. So they fight, and we lose animals through bullfights very often. If we dehorn the animals, it will lead to fewer injuries and deaths caused by these dominant bulls. And look, this one here, I've dehorned this rhino at a certain stage, and 2 years later when I got there, look what we see there. The horns have regrown, and I estimate the weight sitting on that nose at about 3 kilos. 1 kilo on the back horn, 2 kilos on the front horn. So, and if you convert that into money, and at that price we had at that stage of 50,000, which we might reach again at some stage, you never know, that's R1 million per year growth added to the horn. One rhino can produce at least R1 million per year, sustainably, for as long as the rhino lives. Look at this here, there is no influence at all. All the cows have calves in this picture here. They've all dehorned, and they've all got calves, and there are plenty bulls and so forth. There's no issue about them not being able to defend whatever. So what are our big failures in life? CITES. It's a shame to humanity, and you just have to look at the bloody statistics that we see here. The CITES jives to the tune of self-centered, money-driven NGOs and lobby groups. And it's highly comparable to the Free Mandela campaign, if you ever heard about that one. That campaign thrived tremendously while Madiba was in jail. And when he was released, how many people shed crocodile tears for this spring of money drying up? So, and with the NGOs, it's the same. As long as the rhino remains endangered, they thrive. They get all the donations from all the world over. The next challenge we've got is African governments. That's another shame to humanity. Look at the corruption, the incompetence, and the greed. And they dance again to the tune of moneylenders and the foreign interests and dictates. Look what happened with that pile of ivory that got burned. What that government received in exchange for burning the ivory a couple of years ago, Kenya. What happened there? Millions and millions of rand. So that government jived to the tune of those money sponsors, and they actually were killing then our local industry and our local resources. So, but I can understand that governments are hesitant, and our government at the moment, because, and I think partly due to the indignation they suffered, or countries in Africa suffered due to the colonial and the current neo-colonial powers wielding their influence here. To regain interest, dignity, real independence and self-sufficiency, we need to take back sovereign control of our own resources. Africa must take back the control. And if CITES doesn't vote in favor and the government doesn't vote in favor, we must gather enough support from African countries to walk out of CITES. I can see I've got no hope for the coming COP summit of allowing us any leeway and doing things that we are talking here today. I don't think it'll happen. It'll ever happen with all those lobby groups. But if we walk out, Africa becomes independent and declares like a unilateral declaration of independence and start dealing with its own resources on this continent without the interference of mostly Western powers, then we would have achieved something. If we don't do that, we'll carry on seeing this, and this, and this. This is my investigative tour in Zimbabwe the other day before the lockdown. I went to Gonarizo, which is also a fantastic hub, the Transfrontier Park there, Limpopo, Greater Limpopo. But the abject poverty I see there, and it's all over the world, all over the country. I travel widely in SADC, been to Zimbabwe, lecture and sell my capture equipment, passive capture equipment in Zambia, Namibia, Botswana, and so forth. And I see what's happening on the ground and the problems on the ground. So that led me to think about things completely differently. And we have to think out of the box. And Pelham, you said that, mentioned it a couple of times. Out of the box thinking is required. And what is the alternative to this catastrophe? So my suggestion today to us here and to the world is that we have to start a massive community-owned rhino breeding project, driven by public-private partnerships and based on legal horn trade. And that will mean sustainable long-term income for African communities as long as the Asians live under the delusion of the benefits of rhino horns. So what is Operation Firewall? Operation Firewall is a theoretical example here, would be to establish game ranches in community ownership all around the hotspots where rhinos occur. In this example here, that's the Kruger Park in green. And on the Mozambican side and on the South African side, we establish lots and lots of game ranches, commercial game ranches, owned by black communities. And I can tell you, if we present this complete package, this model, to the international community, and maybe even to CITES, and all the other NGOs that hamper our progress, they will start supporting it, because there's big meaning in what I have to say here. It's huge community involvement, and we establish strong economic foundations based on game ranching in general. These game ranches will be the nuclei. They will uplift the economy and the communities through skills development processes and mentorship programs and joint venture situations with hopefully lots of South African farmers with the knowledge and the skills to be transferred to those communities in joint venture situations and make them thrive. So let me tell you how I came to some conclusions about the figures involved here. When I did my dealings with Kruger Park a couple of years ago, say 10 years ago, there were apparently around about 200 surplus rhinos per annum available for sale to the private sector. That is what I was told by officials in the Kruger Park. So I calculated that if I give all of these community game ranches a breeding herd, a starter herd of 6 animals, 2 bulls, 4 females, I could support 33 communities or community ranches. Another assumption that I make, which is not unfounded, that rhinos can actually live for 40 years and produce 8 to 12 calves per annum. We've seen that with the first little rhino that was ever captured. Her name was Zuluana. She landed up in the Pretoria Zoo, and my dad was involved there. He was a zoologist. He was involved there, and she lived for 42 years, and I think she produced about at least 8 calves. I haven't got the official figures because we have to delve in the archives. But 40 years and say roughly 10 calves per cow in her lifetime. So if we cut horns from the age of 6 every 2 years, I'll just skip those calculations, but look at that. After 20 years, one rhino can produce 19.5 million rand, okay, based on that expired horn price of 50,000. But you can replace it with your own figures and we still remain with substantial money. If they live to 40 years old, they can produce 42 million rand. Okay, halve it with the current price. A rhino over 40 years can produce 21 million rand at least at the current horn price. And over her 40 years that she lives, or he, they can produce at least 52 to 56 kilograms of horn. Right. So, and then if we extrapolate those figures, these are the figures of one group or one small animal, extrapolate to the number of communities that we could supply with horns, with rhinos, I mean, we end up talking billions. And I think my calculations are very much in line with your economist's calculation, Pelham. So I think I'm fairly close to the mark, except that my information is a bit outdated. But so on that model of 200 surplus animals per annum from Kruger, which is not true anymore, it's impossible now, those are the numbers of communities that could be supplied with horns. With the rhino, sorry man, these horns keep on bugging my mind. So I'll skip this for a time, and all these calculations and the income per capita that these community members could earn, because that is the big thing, is that we have to empower not only the communities generally, but all individuals in that community. They must, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security, in terms of skills and so forth, to protect those animals. They will be wiped out in no time. That is the big criticism that I keep hearing all the time. But listen what I have to say now. Now we're getting to the core of the story. Billions have to flow into rural development programs. Holistic, big rural development programs. All funded or partly funded by rhino horn sales, if that could come to bear one day. And pay communities exceptionally well for being rhino custodians. They must get big money from offering themselves to be custodians, and pay government well with taxes for doing the preparation work at CITES. We ask them, please come, prepare our case, prepare the case of the communities to the world, to CITES, and then my other suggestion today is also enter into international treaties with those eastern countries. Formalize it. I did it once in a portfolio committee meeting, suggested that we, with Johnny DeLonge those times, I think it was in 2010, suggested that we go into MOUs with Mozambique government. And then he took that, and they eventually did a MOU with Mozambique and so forth. I don't know what the contents was of that treaty, but in any case, there was some receptive, some echo from that side. But now we have to go into bigger international treaties with those eastern countries, China, Thailand, Vietnam, and whoever is also involved, I think. Tie them down with big treaties in front of the world. Let us take the moral high ground by showing that we operate ethically, correctly, we conserve the rhinos properly, the community share, the private sector comes and does his bit in contributions to the whole system in terms of genetic material, in terms of skills, transfer, and all those things. We have to tie people down. Nobody's tied down at the moment, contractually, as far as I can see. Nobody, it's like a free-for-all juggling around with figures and emotions and money and so forth. That is what the money-seeking NGOs want. They want this thing. They want to be everything endangered so that they can thrive from the other side, gathering loads and loads and loads of money from all the naive people all over the world that want to do something good for nature. I can understand a donor wanting to contribute something. So now what we can do in a community with a ranch, somewhere, anywhere in the bush, we turn the whole community into security guards. Not only a company with 3 guards patrolling fences or anything. Everyone, single one there, is formally or informally, either with a uniform or in civilian clothes, be a security guard. Because if that community member can benefit hugely, substantially from what he's doing, looking after that rhino, he will put his life on the front line, protecting that animal. And those whole communities will look after them. Each and every one know this is our asset, we have to look after it. So, but we need money. The money has to come from somewhere. I suggest it should come from legal trade. And then others will fall in line. The donors that were sending money to whoever, I4 and whoever of these NGOs, collecting big money all over there. They can direct that money directly through something that Proa maybe could establish, through a fund or something, directly into those communities, so that the money doesn't get siphoned off along the way in big administrative systems and goes directly there where it's needed, to build schools, clinics, and to motivate hundreds and thousands of community members to be the eyes and ears of the project. Everybody must buy into this thing. And then this I'll leave for a later stage for you. I make this presentation available to anybody who wants. I can send it by Dropbox or whatever. If you want it, I've got a list here. You can just fill in your name and email address and I'll send it to you. But we have to break the poverty cycle. That is what it's all about. The rhinos are the cherry on the top. We can leave them for later. We prepare the communities to be very efficient game ranchers. They start with the impala and warthog and end with a buffalo and a giraffe and everything else and all the other species, sable and so forth, and they've managed that sufficiently. And once they've reached a certain level of competency, then we can decide to bring rhinos. And they've been properly prepared. We don't just haphazardly, sporadically dump a couple of rhinos like in the Limpopo Transfrontier Park. That was done haphazardly. I don't know what studies were done, but those 30 or odd rhinos were just wiped out immediately after landing there in the Transfrontier Park years ago. So there's a dire need that we open up rhino horn trade, because all other things in Africa, all other commodities have failed so far. Gold, diamonds, everything that is mined by multinational corporations all over the world doesn't bring the benefits to the communities. Why are they remaining in perpetual poverty while we've got all these rich resources? Rhino horns are just one of the resources that we can exploit. But all the others are there, the minerals. Where's all the money going? Where's the beneficiation going? It's all done somewhere else. And we get the crumbs falling off the table. That is what's happened in Africa for many, many decades so far, since colonization. So what do I suggest? Partnerships. That's Dr. Mabunda here once at Marakele delivering a speech there, but partnerships with the big role players is important, crucial. The national, provincial, and the private sector, they must take hands and they must start doing things. And since the 200 animal-strong annual surplus from Kruger is no more, because what is left in Kruger, where can we get them from now? So look at this. It's quite amazing. The private sector, that I regard as a modern bastion of rhino conservation. There's no argument about that. It's not anymore the national authority that is the guardian of the rhinos. They've proved that they are not. The private sector has proved that they can do the thing. And if we have like 7,000 rhino at the moment in private ownership, and we conservatively estimate the growth rate at 3%, the population growth could well be 200 per annum from that. And that fits nicely into my previous calculations of the 200 that came from Kruger initially. So, now how can we do that? If the private sector, where's the private sector going with all the surpluses in any case at the moment? I don't know. The market is dead. Nobody wants to buy rhinos. Pete just told me he might have a buyer for this or that, but the market is dead actually. Nobody wants them. So, but if we present to the world a meaningful model of participating communities, which will all benefit substantially, not crumbs falling from the table, but substantially. Everybody must have cash in his pocket. There must be a clinic around the corner and a business that he can take part in. We have to support businesses and schools and everything. If that would be the case, we would open the money taps from all over the world. I can almost guarantee you that. That old Tanny sitting in New York, not knowing what to do with the millions that she's inherited from a Silicon Valley husband, and after the NGOs being exposed as like Free Mandela campaignists, she would rather direct her money or channel her money into something proper, which is properly run by whoever. I don't know who to suggest. That's a new thought on the table. But what are the conditions for public-private partnerships? Okay, here they are. It's quite a list. Legalize horn trade. Develop a strictly controlled international market. And you've done lots of work at Proa already to deal with that question. We have to develop highly effective security systems. We can't leave them, although we've got the whole community looking after them. That must be a properly designed and managed system, a rural security system. Then also we have to have experts in control of these joint venture operations of the community land with their valuable assets, and the private sector in South Africa with all the skills and knowledge that we could contribute. Experts must be in charge. And then we enter into intensive long-term community education and skills development program. We have to bring all the skills there, from professional hunters to trackers to meat processors to everything, because we are doing the full spectrum of game ranch management systems and procedures that we want to establish on these places. We want to develop entrepreneurship and business sense in these communities. They must be turned, or they must volunteer to become entrepreneurs. So what have I been doing now? I'm coming to the end of my talk now. I've established a company by the name of Eco Group Africa. And we have developed all the time that I've been so quiet since the 2010 participation at the Portfolio Committee in Cape Town, in the building, incidentally, that is burned down now for some reason. I've been developing this rural development plan, which could be applied not to only our own country with our own challenges here, and I heard Lindiwe's comment about the big challenges of economy, winding up the economy again in our country. That is our first priority, because we are the bastion of rhino conservation. So we have to look after our own assets first, and then we can transplant the development plan to other rhino range states. I was so saddened to hear the numbers of countries that have disappeared from the rhino range list, from 33 to what it's now. Very little is left where people are looking after rhinos in Africa. And I want to stress this again. These United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are our trump card in the sleeve. We have to drive that message home to the world, that if we develop our models in such a way that we comply with all 17 of these development goals, and here they are, but they are also in the presentation here, and you can Google them. Google SDG, the 17 goals. Look at that. Rhino conservation, game ranching, and transforming rural areas into prosperous wildlife economy centers, each and every one. Hope at first in a firewall situation around the hotspots where there still many rhinos occur, eventually spreading into the countryside, into all the SADC countries, into the biomes where wildlife and rhinos especially can thrive. We have millions and millions of hectares lying in Africa, and I've seen it with my own eyes, lying fallow. Nothing is happening there. We, as the rhino custodians, we can drive the process of starting this big rural development process. It's a long-term process. There's no quick cure for this, for our dilemma which we are sitting in. So it's a long-term approach, and it will work. I will almost guarantee you it will work. We're not protecting only the wildlife, we're protecting ecosystems which are going down the drain. We will counteract desertification. We will counteract bush encroachment. We will lift the productivity of farmland in terms of food security, in terms of production, in terms of beauty for tourists to come and enjoy. If we do it properly, and all the experts and all the willing contributors to this project come together and they design a big model, of which I may be humbly so have laid a little foundation. And if anybody wants to come and talk to me and we can widen the scope and we can involve more people, I'm very happy to welcome you on my little canoe sitting on the Zambezi River and dodging crocodiles and hippos everywhere. But we can talk. So if the government, and that's my big conclusion now, if the government could convince CITES in the world that legislation is the way to go, everybody will only win. The rural communities in Africa, which would be involved then in this CBNRM, if you don't know what that means, it's community-based national resource management. Those communities will thrive. It will explode. The economy, the socio-economic conditions will explode in those rural areas. The SA community at large, through the big tax revenues that we would, the government would gather, the conservationists all over the world would finally admit this is the answer. The holistic big answer. It's no use us killing each other and having military-style operations and poachers come with ever bigger guns and killing everything they see. We must stop the war. We must start working together. And I was thinking all along at some stage that Mr. Navarra in Masingir, we must actually invite him to become the custodian of the breeding projects of those firewall farms on the Mozambican side. Why not? Why don't we turn the poacher into a conservationist by dangling this very exclusive carrot in front of his nose and in front of the world of how the communities and how everybody would start benefiting if we do it in the correct way. But now finally, I think our chances of being successful and victorious at the next CITES meeting is very, very slim. I'm not at all optimistic that we would gain any ground there. No illusion about that. Because those lobbyists, those international NGOs, which were like in the Free Mandela campaign style, gather money all the time, they are too strong. There's huge money, billions of rands or dollars sitting behind them. And they can just bribe anyone they want to at CITES or everywhere in the world. Leading up to every summit, I think the money is now flowing nicely into coffers of individuals and governments, treasuries, from these sources. I can guarantee you that is what's happening at the moment. So, what remains for us to do? I think if we don't get any joy at next CITES and get legalized horn trade, it will reality mean that they deny Africa its sovereignty, its financial freedom, and independence. The continent will remain in perpetual poverty, dependence on others for handouts, little handouts, the crumbs of the table, and remain de facto the slaves of the Western powers. That is what's going to happen. So better we unite now, strategize in time before it's too late. Ladies and gentlemen, we are 1 minute away in the Rhino doomsday clock from midnight. So I thank you.
Thank you, Wilhelm, for that very thought-provoking presentation. Colleagues, any questions for Wilhelm? Lindiwe?
Yes. Thanks, Willem, for the insightful presentation. On the, when you spoke about the empowerment on the ranching nuclear model, has there been anything that you have already crafted on that? Secondly, what I'm trying to do, part of that, and it's something that we need to do, is because with the Waterberg District Municipality, is we would like to, in actual fact, like here in Missouri Lodge, look into having sort of your breeding camps, but at the same time, transfer that ownership to those communities. So I just wanted to find out from you, what have you crafted around that? And how can we look into really trying to move that and adopting it in our space, if I can put it that way?
Okay, thank you. That's a core question to this whole thing. And at the moment, I'm drafting my business plan, the Eco Group Africa business plan, which is quite complicated because being an ecologist, I look at systems holistically. So the change that I would like to effect in Africa, starting in South Africa, is a scale economy and a scale ecology model. Because we've got millions of people in poverty and independence on government grants and so forth. We can't only look at small projects. It's a big project. I would like to engage with people on a, you see, I'm a strategist. I'm thinking on a strategic level. I would like to engage with people on a high level where we can design models and systems which have a wide-ranging influence all over the landscape in as many as possible communities and countries and regions. To answer your question directly, I've designed a model for a farm, talking about the holistic approach, looking at these things, dividing it up from a management systems up into various pillars of the economy of a game ranch. For example, I'm not against, I'm all in favor of wildlife ranching. That is why I'm here. That is my big passion. But I'm not against cattle and other livestock. So if we haven't got a good system in terms of wildlife economy going on a certain place, we can start with what is there already. We optimize their cattle ranching abilities. We start winding up the economy, giving people something to eat on a regular basis and not having them to following all kinds of crooked avenues to get to some or other sustainable livelihood situation. But, we have to take it step by step. We can start with goats and cattle, get that little economy going, then the ranch or the area, and in Zimbabwe at near Gona Reserve, they sit with tens of thousands of hectares of land. We could compartmentalize a little bit these agricultural activities. And I'm very much in favor of regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture would tick another box in the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So if we come with a model telling them that, and this is what we're doing on the land, we're planting lucerne, we're looking after the cattle, we're giving, we do vegetable gardens, whatever, on a larger scale to provide as many as possible people with livelihood and food, start educating, start upskilling, start establishing businesses, start making people entrepreneurs so that they can do things, process, whatever. We're preparing it step by step by step for the bigger picture, which is wildlife ranching in Africa. Wildlife ranching ticks the box of climate change mitigation. Did you know that? We're sitting on a treasure trove with wildlife. We can tick the world's boxes, all these greenies that constantly look at us and say, but the climate thing, Why? Because these wild animals are well adapted to African conditions. And if the conditions become harsher and harsher and harsher, and drier, as is expected over huge ranges of land, the wildlife will survive, the cattle will succumb, and the goats will succumb, because they need so much water per day and so forth. So I've got a good model in my head of how to structure these ranches, prepare them for investments. That auntie in New York with her billions that she's inherited, we can tell her, here's the thing. Come and we'll show you. Come and visit us and we give you an investment opportunity of your lifetime.
Okay. Colleagues, all right, we need to make a decision because it's 1 o'clock. We need to decide, are we going to break for lunch or can we continue working? I'm in the hands of the meeting before I take a question at the back there. I don't know what everybody's times are. We still need to formulate a resolution and the way forward. Can I just get a quick feedback from the meeting? Do you want to break now for half an hour? Okay, in the meantime, we'll carry on. There's a suggestion that we just proceed for a while and we can break whenever the meeting feels like it. Question at the back?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. No. I just want to emphasize on educating the communities. It will always be difficult to lobby them to your corner unless they understand what is it in for them. And I think our lobby to galvanize enough support for this lobbying, we need to educate the communities to understand what is this thing. I came here today, I can tell there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but I can tell you, somebody who never attended this thing, I can tell you, if you go and speak about this thing and say he must see an opportunity in this thing, I can tell it's going to be very difficult for those people. Therefore, we need to open up in terms of lobbying, in terms of trying to educate people so that when they sit down, they see an opportunity in this thing. So when you lobby, they know that you lobby on their behalf and it is for them to benefit. Thank you.
Okay, good point, noted. Colleagues, so I just want to do a wrap-up on what Wilhelm said. And he captured very well the key role that the private sector is playing now in rhino conservation, species survival, not only picking up a point that Ruben made reference to of the export of rhino to existing range states, but also the aspect that we have what's known as CBOs, captive breeding operations. Now these are silos, protected areas of high density of rhino that can be utilized for, I'm going to loosely state, return to the wild. Now we do not want to simply return them to the wild as in Kruger, where 2 days later they are shot and killed. But in terms of assisting these various community projects that have been discussed this morning, don't be worried by saying, and where are the rhino that can populate these various operations? The private sector has the rhino. Wilhelm in his calculations spoke about a 3% population growth. Our analysis, based on our surveys, we are achieving as much as a 7% population growth, which is quite phenomenal. So you've got private sector on a positive arc. You've got national and provincial reserves, many of them in a decline situation. So, but if you negate the two, you still have a static population in the middle with enough buffer for us to be able to fulfill that. Just one point before I move on. We are live streaming, and a gentleman called Dylan Unterhorst called in. And his question was, what can we as a working group do or think to outcreate, was his words, or outmaneuver the dishonesty or the illegal trade with own legal trade at lower price, which I think is something that we discussed already. It's market forces. So criminals are effectively businessmen. They do what they do to make money, whether they do it legally or illegally. So now what they would have to react to market forces, exactly as what happened with the drug trade, the legal sale of marijuana in Europe and now in many parts of the world. That illegal trade collapsed completely, and has now been replaced by a legal trade. Many of the role players move from an illegal role now into a legal purveyor because they still have the same client base. So thank you for that question. Colleagues, and if I go now to the agenda, in terms of our program detail, we have concluded then the group discussion exploring opportunities and challenges. The next point of the agenda is to discuss now the way forward, and then the preparation of a draft resolution, and finally the adoption of a meeting resolution. Now, we were planning to close at 3. I think we have, in fact, through the dialogue, picked up a lot of the way forward points as well. So I'm wondering whether we can start to formulate what are the way forward. So in terms of the discussion on, as I repeat, way forward, draft resolution, and finally a meeting resolution. Can I ask the meeting, in terms of the way forward, what would you still like to address in this forum? Suggestions from the floor, please.
Thank you. I think for the way forward, I presume it's being maybe simplistic to say what we would want to suggest going forward, because I think this is where the gist of the discussion should be, coming up and delving into discussions in terms of what are the possible solutions now going forward. This include identifying the stakeholders. We do that analysis and see who is available, who is, and the kind of stakeholders, the levels in which they are in. Some are easy to get, some require a lot of lobbying, some we can just get an appointment tomorrow, some requires others to use other means to get into them. But secondly, what is our proposal to them? So that is what we should be discussing. When we are, say we are meeting politicians, what do you want to say to them? Do we want them to be this a point of discussion that they raise in Parliament, vis-a-vis linking it to the issue of high unemployment? How could this be unlocking opportunities that will reduce that? But also taking it even a scale up. How do we lobby and get to a space where the governments, as you have talked about, instead of it being Eswatini, Namibia, and South Africa's decision, how does it get into a SADC table of discussion? And this becomes a position of SADC going forward. And how do we even move it to the level of African Union? And also the lobbying of other partners that are going to be involved in this. But most importantly, also talking to the point of saying, how do we channel resources towards having the community buy-in? Because if we have the community understanding the value that can be unlocked from this, and having them participating and coming up with some economic value for them, I want to believe that they will add their voice. In Eswatini, when people are electing their MPs, these are some of the things that could be up for discussions and even taken to a point where it is deliberated. So I think for me, it is just identifying those stakeholders and discussing what is it that we are presenting to the different stakeholders depending on their level of influence.
Super, thank you very much. Nice parameters there. I think they're short and sweet. They're very much in line with what we've been discussing. Can we build on those two? Okay, so then before we go into the proposal, we're going to have to hop around from subject to subject here. So we're talking about who are the stakeholders, because we've referred to communities, we referred to politicians, we've spoken to the rhino custodians, and it's the proposal. So I think we have to get the horse before the cart insofar as, and what is the unified message? From this forum, is there a feeling that we have a consensus position? Because if we have that, and then that, we therefore have the product. And what is the product we now wish to present to the stakeholders who in turn need to run with the ball in a rugby match context? So colleagues, is there any concerns, any misgivings about the various discussions, presentations around sustainable utilization? Bearing in mind it is entrenched in the South African Constitution. It's simply a matter of, and it shall not be detrimental to the species, which we have proven it cannot and it shall not be. We certainly will defend those species without being melodramatic with our lives. So, do we have consensus that the utilization within the wildlife economy and the Southern African economy of possible utilization of rhino horn trade can be beneficial to communities, etc.? Is there any voice in the room that is uncomfortable with that as a summary position from this meeting? Okay, so I seem to pick up that there is consensus of a support for the notion of sustainable utilization, the concept of taking rhino horn trade as a possibility to higher authority as a product that is coming out of this workshop. Having said that, then now we say, okay, then who are the stakeholders? Because these are the individuals that we are going to entrust to take this requirement, this suggestion, this proposal, this plea, now and turn it into reality. I'm going to repeat what I said earlier on in the meeting. We have studied the CITES legislation in great detail. We have consulted with legal experts within CITES and Director Generals of CITES. We have studied the South African legislation. We have received opinion from senior counsel. There is nothing in the South African legislation or the CITES legislation to prevent us from starting to trade rhino horn tomorrow morning. It requires a political will, and it requires an export certificate, and obviously it requires a trading partner. It is as simple as that. But that is high-end negotiations way above my pay grade. This is something where we now need to turn to our politicians, and that's why, again, I'm delighted that we have the representatives from Eswatini present today. So it becomes a unified lobby. The Namibians are also watching this process, because don't forget, the Namibians themselves also put forward a trade proposal at the last COP, and certainly will support any initiative, I believe, that is driven along this kind of ideology. So then our role players are obviously our senior politicians, and why we have to look at it from a top-down approach is because COP is the latter part of this year. The protocols in terms of COP is that a country needs to submit their proposals at least 6 months prior to a COP. In other words, we only have X number of months left, 2-3 months, for the South African government, Eswatini, Namibia, and any other SADC members to consider this issue and put forward a proposal. That is one action area. The other action is, and we don't need to work through CITES insofar as having a resolution. We can, with a trading partner, start to export horn tomorrow morning. Is the meeting comfortable with that as a summary? If I have got it wrong in any way and someone has an opposing viewpoint in terms of process and protocols, please correct me. I've got
on the part of the 3 legs that you talked about, political willingness, the permit, and a trade partner. On the part of the trade partner, are we ready to have an unmasked partner, or have we identified a trade partner that could trade clearly there and really have an identity and say this is the agreement that we are doing? Of course, notwithstanding that the CITES thing will still be there, are they also willing to say, if we are going the extreme route of Afrexit, whatever you call it, and then the partner will be able to then support that and say, I need that, it is good for it. So have we identified that so that we consolidate and have a unified idea moving forward?
Okay, I'm going to take the other questions and I'll answer. Please go ahead, sir.
So on top of what you've just summarized, I agree with the summary, but I think we will be very delusional if we forget that the background of where this kind of business comes from. If you go to the politicians and you don't peg the transformation side of it moving forward, to say how committed are we to transform the business itself in terms of it moving forward and get the buy-in from the politicians, you might not win. Thank you.
Thank you. Transformation coming up again and again. Very, very important to this meeting. I'm just waiting for the speaker.
Yeah. I think I like the presentation when he spoke about the ecosystem. And when I direct the question from the beginning, it has to do with the latter question. Now, I want you to flip back, that is the idea that I buy, that should form part of the resolution. I think it's slide 44 and 45, those slides. Thank you.
Okay, so the key words coming up here: transformation, eco-economy, communities. Now, to go back to one of the earlier questions in terms of trading partners, well, obviously I cannot speak on behalf of China or any other country. That will, any emerging trade arrangements, agreements will obviously come out at high end, because don't forget, CITES comprises of members, and members are states, as in countries. So I can attend CITES as an NGO, I can speak, but I cannot vote. It is South Africa who is the member, and it is only South Africa's CITES authority, so it's a division within the Department of Environmental Affairs, who is the issuing authority and ensures compliance for the granting of an export permit, whether it be for a endangered parrot, snake, whatever, whether it be for a zoo, whether it is what is referred to as a specimen of a species. So you have a rhino, and the rhino horn is the specimen of the species. So all of that is at government high-end level. Certainly, I can tell you, because it's in the public domain, that the Chinese government did talk about the possibility of trade. The Chinese are large consumers of rhino horn, and I do not believe that the Chinese authorities have a very harsh law enforcement strategy on the utilization, because there is free trade of individuals coming out of China, going to Laos, buying rhino products and taking them back, and the product of TCM is widely available. So again, the answer to that question is up to the executives of Eswatini, Namibia, South Africa, and obviously the SADC. It is also worth noting on SADC that the members tend to work very closely together. It is very seldom that one SADC member will act or vote against the coalition of SADC members. And I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember how many countries there are that make up SADC, but it's about 18. It actually includes Madagascar. All right. So, colleagues, maybe what we should do is now break for a lunch of about 15 minutes. Then I could possibly sit and with Lendiwe and a few others and try to formulate this into some kind of a resolution, a bullet point resolution. We can then come back from the break, and then we can present this to the meeting, confirm that we have a consensus in terms of the terminology, and whom are the stakeholders who we are going to appeal to drive the process. Is the meeting happy with that position? All right. Can we then close, what's the time now, somebody? 1:15. Do we need, is half an hour okay? We're quite a small group. I think we can eat quite quickly. 1:15. Can we be back here at 1:45, and then we will start to summarize and work towards closure? Is everybody comfortable? All right, super. Thank you very much.